This video is going to have a look at how do we identify perpendicular lines. So perpendicular lines are linear lines that intersect at an angle of 90 degrees. So the test for perpendicular lines is the gradient of line 1 multiplied by the gradient of line 2. If that is equal to -1, then the lines are going to be perpendicular. If the gradient of line 1 multiplied by the gradient of line 2 equals anything but -1, then the lines will not be perpendicular. So let's have a look at some examples of how do we identify perpendicular lines. So in example 1, we want to show that the following lines are perpendicular, and we've got two equations, y equals -2x plus 4 and y equals x over 2 minus 1. So because they're in the form of y equals mx plus c, we can easily identify our two gradients. So our first gradient is going to be -2. Our second gradient is going to be 1/2. So to test for perpendicularity, we can multiply gradient 1 by gradient 2. So -2 times 1/2, and then it's going to equal to -1. So the test shows that these two lines are going to be perpendicular. So let's have a look at what they look like after we graph them onto the Cartesian plane. So I can use the gradient intercepts method to be able to graph these two lines. So the first one, y equals -2x plus 4, starting at my y-intercept of +4, and a gradient of -2 means every time x goes over by 1, y goes down by 2. So over 1 down 2, put a dot, over 1 down 2, put another dot, and then join my dots up with a straight line. So that is my y equals -2x plus 4 line. Having a look at my second line, y equals x squared minus 2. So starting at my y-intercept of -2, and this time a positive gradient of 1/2. Every time x goes up by 2, y goes up by 1. So this time we're going over 2, up 1, over 2, up 1, over 2, up 1, and then joining these dots with a straight line. And that is going to be my y equals x divided by 2 minus 2 line. So having a look at the graph, we can see that those two lines are perpendicular and that they are intersecting at an angle of 90 degrees. So that's an example of how we can graph perpendicular lines and also identify them using the gradient. So let's have a look at a second example. And in our second example, we want to determine if the following lines are perpendicular. So we've got y equals -3x plus 4, and we've got 6y minus 2x minus 18 is equal to 0. Now to be able to identify the gradient, the line needs to be in the form of y equals mx plus c. So my first line is in the form of y equals mx plus c, but my second line is not. So I need to go through and make some adjustments to get it into that form. So the first adjustment I'm going to make is I'm going to remove that -2x minus 18 from the side with 6y and move it over to the other side. So I'm going to plus 2x plus 18 plus 2x plus 18. So 6y is going to equal to 2x plus 18. So then to get y by itself, I need to divide both sides by 6. So y is going to equal to 2x over 6 plus 18 divided by 6. So y is equal to x over 3 plus 3. So now they're both in the form of y equals mx plus c. I can identify the gradient of my first line is going to be -3. And the gradient of my second line is going to be 1/3. So now I can test for perpendicularity by multiplying gradient 1 by gradient 2, and that is going to equal to -3 times by 1/3, and that is going to equal to -1. So because my gradients multiplied equals -1, therefore the lines are perpendicular. So that is an example of how we can determine if two lines are perpendicular by identifying the gradient and multiplying the gradients together to see if they equal -1. So let's have a look at one last example. In our last example, we want to determine if the following lines are perpendicular. And we've got the equations y equals 2x minus 1, y equals -2x plus 4. So we can see that both lines are in the form of y equals mx plus c, so we can easily identify our gradients. The gradient of the first line is going to be 2. The gradient of the second line is going to be -2. So to test to see whether they are perpendicular, we need to multiply our gradients together. So gradient 1 multiplied by gradient 2. So it's going to be 2 multiplied by -2, and that is going to equal to -4. So because the two gradients, when multiplied together, do not equal -1, so therefore the lines are not perpendicular. So that is an example of how we can test to determine if two lines are perpendicular.